Okay, ikaw?
Get the pulled up for yesterday and go over the the lab from the other day. All right, well, thanks for joining, Basira. Hopefully, yes, everyone's enjoying their Saturday elsewhere. But we'll go over the lab from Tuesday. So, just like in most of the labs, we just need to make sure you're in your Windows server. You got into Hyper-V. You got your Kali box and Windows 10 box up and running. Like I was saying the last time, I went and ahead and got those started a while ago, and I think it takes a bit of catching up once you boot those up. So, uh, recommend getting those started, walking away for a few minutes, and letting the boot process kick off. And the Windows machine might want to kick off of an AV scan if it's been shut down for more than a day. So, but yeah, I've had them running for a little while today, so they should be good to go. So I'll go ahead and skip to the part of the lab where we start running just some basic network scanning. So I think this is our first lab where we're using Nmap to do some network scanning. Um, so the first thing it wants us to do is just use a network discovery scan um, for the whole network. So it's like I was saying the other day, that first scan we're scanning the entire subnet. So and we're using the dash SN. Um, I myself don't ever really have all these switches memorized. It takes me a while to kind of figure out what I'm going to be using if I haven't done Nmap scans in a long time. Um, After this, I'm going to go ahead and have a Wireshark cheat sheet that I like to reference. So I'll be sure to drop that in the chat today. It's a good reference to have because definitely not easy to remember what all these different switches to. So we'll kick off that subnet scan. So, um, and then with Nmap, well, show on the next scan, but this was not a very big network. We just have a few machines on the lab right here. Uh, First thing I noticed when I ran this scan uh, earlier today, this .175, which I referenced earlier, was not showing up in my network scan report. So when I first looked at it, so this might be a step that's not in the lab that you may need to troubleshoot if we're doing anything that involves targeting 175 because and then the lab instructions, it calls out like you should see .40, which is your Win10 PC, and then it also called up .175. So .175 is this Metasploitable machine. Um, if you've never heard of Metasploitable, I mean the name is it's meant to be a machine that's good for testing exploits on. The program Metasploit. If you're There's a ton of attacks in the Metasploit suite, and this Metasploitable virtual machine, you can download it from the internet, install it onto any host, and it's a very very vulnerable operating system. So it's really good for testing out these attacks. So I went in when I first had that error. I opened up my Metasploitable box, and it was stuck on a boot error. So I had to go in, hit the little stop turn off button, wait a minute, hit the turn on button. It took about uh, 10 plus minutes to boot up, and then I got to this Metasploitable login screen. So if you're running into that error where .75 is not showing up, and this is where you want to make sure this Metasploitable box is up and running. So just something to keep in mind. It's not in any of the lab directions. So, but yeah, so I went through that and discovered wasn't running. So, but as you can see now, it's showing up on the scan. So important to take note of that as we're moving on to the other parts of the lab. Um, so next part of lab, it's going to ask that we do a Nmap scan on our Windows machine. So this is, and we're using the dash A switch. So it's 40. And so I'll go ahead and run this scan. And one thing that you will notice, you wait like, 20 seconds or so, uh, you're sitting there kind of wondering, is this working? Am I doing it right? It doesn't seem to be moving. If you go ahead and hit enter after you've kicked off your scan, you'll see kind of where the progress is. If you're running the graphical user interface version of ZenMap, you'll kind of see a percentage status. Um, but yeah, in this CLI version, anytime you kick off something, just hit enter. It'll give you kind of where you're at. So as you can see, the scan finished up. It's showing, let me scroll up a little bit, showing a number of uh, information about the system. You see some ports open. This one right here, it's running this. This is the protocol. It's just some universal plug and play networking protocol. Nothing too insecure looking. And then Nmap, it has some signatures to help it have some sort of identification of what the OS is. So, the other day I mentioned OS fingerprinting. Um, Certain operating systems reply differently when you send it a ping. And then when these service scans pop up, so it's using what information it got back to make a guess on what type of operating system is running. So it's guessing it's a Windows XP SP3 Service Pack 3, and it thinks it's 85% correct. And I believe it's wrong, but at least for the most part, you're in the Windows family here. And it did say that it's not 100% correct here. So every once in a while, you'll get depending on how many ports and protocols are running, it will up that percentage accuracy. So yeah, it's not 100% sure. And then it does show the network distance, since this is on the same subnet. It's just one hop. It's not even hopping across another router. So, and then our next step, um, we'll do we'll scan our Metasplittable box. So I'll kick that off, and this one, you'll notice, I'll hit enter. It's gonna take a little bit. Um, I ran this earlier, and I think it took about, I don't know, maybe almost 5 minutes to complete. But as you can see, I'm hitting enter. It says it's about 79% done with the SYN stealth scan. Hit enter again. Give it a second. It's moved on to this other scan, the service scan timing. I think that's where it took a little bit long because it does have a bunch of things running. I'll go ahead, Control C, and cancel this since I already ran this and I took the output. So in our next steps in the lab, it's going to tell you to run the same scan, put a -on after the host. So pull that command up. Um, and -on, and this is where you're telling Nmap to kind of output it to a text file. Um, so I ran it both for the Metasploitable and the Windows machine. And one thing to call out, on the lab, this is the page 9. There's a typo on the command it asks you to put in. It says to scan port .100. .100 is your own Kali Linux machine. What really should be .40. So just a heads up that there's a little bit of a typo on this. So I ran both of these. So I'm gonna go ahead and just open up the documents in Nano. We looked at the Windows one. Nothing too interesting on the output. Like I said, there was about one uh, port of interest open. So we're going to open up the output for Metasploitable. So this one has a lot more interesting things. So this is where we see that there's a FTP server running. It has the type of version v FTPD. Says anonymous FTP login allowed, so that's pretty interesting. Tells you Open SSH. We have Telnet, Postfix. There's a lot of services running on this, and like I said, this is Metasploitable. It's meant to be definitely not secure. So if you look up a lot of these versions of software running, you'll find that there's a lot of vulnerabilities. I'll just pick bind 9.4.2 and just do a like it pops up right here. So as you can see, this and it even calls out there's a Metasploit exploit here. So yeah, if you look up any of these protocols that's running, um, you'll notice a lot of vulnerabilities. But with that, like this is you're not going to see something this bad in real life, but it's not uncommon to see some sort of vulnerabilities. This I'm sure this Apache HTTP is going to have a lot of vulnerabilities as well, and we have a lot of protocols for Windows networking completely wide open. So a lot of interesting stuff that's fun to poke at with Metasploit here. Um, let's see what else is interesting here. And let's see what the OS guess comes out to. Oh, where did it go? Oh, let's see. Oh, there. So OS, it says Linux 269, and it thinks it didn't put the percentage here. Not quite sure why, but something to just some useful information to keep an eye out for. But yeah, so that's the Metasploitable output with captured to a text file. Uh, and one thing that you kind of put together from something we touched on a couple weeks ago, you know, a lot of times if you were to run this, type out the command a bunch of times, this could take you a lot of time. So a lot of times you'll see people build bash scripts. They'll just do kind of, either they'll put a for loop and they'll do the subnet scan and they'll output that and then they'll kind of set up a follow-up and map scan and they'll be able to kind of automate this whole thing to get an idea of all the open ports on the network. So we're going through all the manual steps, but that's you always kind of want to optimize your work effort. And the other important thing to call out is this nmap scan is very noisy. If anybody's running any kind of IDS, it will trigger an alert. So the IDS is going to say it's going to know that this is an nmap scan, and I think A is I meant to say this earlier is dash A is called an aggressive scan. So aggressive scan, it's kind of like it's saying it's being pretty aggressive. There's other switches for nmap to make it a bit more passive, a bit more quiet, but generally speaking, anytime you're you're sending traffic to a host to do some kind of reconnaissance, it is uh, any level of active scanning has a level of possible detection. But yeah, the aggressive scan, it'll trigger alerts all over the place. All right, so next, we're going to go ahead and do an example attack on the FTP service that's running. So let's see, let's go ahead and so I'll show the command that it wants to run. So I think I talked about Hydra the other day. It's a password cracking application, um, and it's pretty versatile. Like right now, you see the format is we're doing MSF admin as the username. Dash P is a password list. So it's pointing to password.txt to be our password list, and the target's this FTP server. You can point Hydra at all sorts of different login interfaces. Like you can point it to an HTTP or HTTPS login. There is a number of other protocols that it automatically knows how to interact with the login page. So in this example, let's give that a try. And this will be pretty quick because and I'll show you in a second. So it's showing that it found the password is cybersecurity on this FTP server. Pretty weak password. And then I'll show what's in the password.txt file. So not a very long password.txt file. So for the purpose of this lab, it's pretty short because it would take pretty long time to run. Like a lot of times these word lists are thousands of rows long. But as you can see right here, this has been customized for this lab. We have cybersecurity, and then we also see top secret here, which we already know that's a Windows machine in the lab. So yeah, in a real lab, a real password word list, you're going to have a lot more rows. So, but for the purpose of this lab, you can see here. So it took pretty quickly, and it was able to find the password of this MSF admin running on the FTP server. Um, and I think let's move on to the other lab. So the next one, it wants us to do ARP spoofing, and in that way we can start intercepting traffic since we're on the same network as that Windows machine. So first step, it wants me to set up some IP forwarding. So it gave us a command to run. Let me get that command going here. Right, make sure I type this out correctly. I'll say the T command is something that goes all the way back to Linux distributions and Unix distributions. It's essentially telling T is the command it's gonna forward traffic. So I've seen this in I think, see if this runs here. Oh, I have to run that with sudo. So like if you're running a lot of permission denied. Run through the lab anyway and see if this still works. Well, it gave me a return one like the lab says, so I don't want to, let's run through it and see if it works here. So it wants us to make sure BetterCap's installed. So okay.
Hey, sorry I came in late. Sorry I came in late. What are we doing right now?
Going over the lab from Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
The yeah,
Cali one? What is it?
yeah. So we went
Okay.
over the Nmap scanning and then doing the FTP password attack on the server there. So and yeah, so it's on about page 15 of the lab from Tuesday. Yeah, so we're gonna do an ARP spoofing attack here. So just getting the repositories updated, make sure BetterCap's installed and running, and then we'll go ahead with this lab. Oh, to self, I'll try and run these updates first before the lab. There we go. All right. Run the install. So it's already installed, running the latest version. So we'll go ahead and start BetterCap. Like many of the tools that's manipulating your network interfaces, this has to run with sudo privileges. Okay, so next, we got to go into our Windows machine and start generating some network traffic. So switch over to the Windows machine. Yes, everything wants to get us to use AI. There we go. So we're gonna ping the Google DNS server. Let me ping it one time. All right, it's working. Let me set up a continuous ping. All right, so we'll leave that running. Continue on with the lab. So for BetterCap, we set that up because we wanted to set up some traffic that we can intercept. So we're just using some pings. In real life, this would be somebody would be on that machine, actually doing stuff that for more interesting traffic that we might want to intercept. So, but for the purposes of lab, we're just going to be trying to intercept some pings to Google. So next part, let's set up a. Let's do some TCP dump to monitor for those pings. So we're back on our Kali machine. So we'll leave this running. Oh, done. Says it doesn't support monitor mode. Okay. You know what? Let's do lowercase I. Um, so we'll leave that running, and we'll go back to BetterCap and set up our ARP spoofing, and then once we get it right, we'll hopefully see those pings to Google or the replies to from those Google pings come to our Kali machine. So we're starting to see some of it already just by having it the net probe on. Oh, let me get these commands right. So now we are receiving the pings from the responses from Google DNS that's going back to the Windows machine. So because we're on the same network, we let this program is essentially looking at hey, who's dot 40, what's their MAC address, and now we're sending out on the network that we're this MAC address. So we're now receiving uh, the pings back. If there was other interesting traffic, like for example, you know, web traffic, and it was unencrypted, you could collect all of their whatever sites they're logging into. So yeah, this is where, if you were doing this in real life, maybe where our TCP dump capture isn't just set to ICMP, maybe we're sending it to all traffic, and then we can take a look at that PCAP later and see if there's any interesting things like passwords, stuff, other things like that. So, but yeah, so it's essentially working. So if you're on the same network as a target, you can go ahead and start intercepting traffic for directed to their MAC address. So using this, so we'll go ahead and turn that off. So this one went ahead and worked here. Those are TCP dump here. Let's stop the ping on our Windows machine. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to capture a network LAN manager NTLM password hash and then attempt to crack that password. Uh, so there's another program on Kali called Responder. Go ahead and launch that. And like I said, there's a lot of built-in tools on Kali Linux to do all sorts of malicious things on a network. So we'll run this program. So right now it's running and it's going to listen for authentication requests over the network. And again, since both these machines are on the same network, it's passively listening for anything that's gonna, and it's set up to intercept that type of traffic. So on our Windows machine, we're gonna go and hopefully generate this network authentication request. So I'm gonna open up Windows Explorer. It's gonna take a bit here. And we're going to generate this by just trying to access a network share that does not exist. So, the example is just telling you to put in this, and it should start looking around for, does this exist? It's going to send out uh, a request, and then I'm logged on as the student account, so it's trying to set out a network, trying to reach out to a network using the hashed authentication of student. So we should get a error in a second. Heck. This is definitely taking a second. Yeah, this might take a few minutes. Maybe a good time. We're almost at the top of the hour. We'll take a quick break till 1 p.m. Pacific, and hopefully this will have generated some network traffic. So, yeah, we'll take a quick break. I'm gonna wait for this to finish. Be back in about 10 minutes. Okay, we'll get started in a second. All right. I'm not sure why it's not generating the network event. I'm not sure if something's hung up. I'm definitely gonna go troubleshoot this one, and hopefully I can finish it out on Monday. But either my Windows machine is just hanging or something's happening wrong. So I don't want to hold up things trying to troubleshoot it now. So I'll probably figure out why this one didn't work out as it should have after we get through this content. And yeah, Nitjan, I would say I'll be back in the classroom next week if you want to head out that way. So I'll say this. Yeah, I didn't want to get anyone sick, so I feel a lot better now. But just give it a week before I start leaving the home office. And then if I've ever not there and somebody just so happens to need to get in, I can make arrangements to get somebody in. But yeah, but next week, Tuesday, I'll definitely be there. And I'll let you all know if I'm for something reason can't make it out there for whatever reason. All right, so yeah, I'll figure out why that's not working. Probably go over that either probably on Tuesday's class, just because I think that's a really good lab to go through. So and but yeah, we'll get through this last module for this week. So secure network technologies. Some of this will be a little bit of review, or maybe we'll go a little more in depth on things that we didn't touch on in too much detail. But we're going to cover a bit more on the cryptography aspect of it because the big thing these labs are pointing out is these the connections that are either not encrypted or how we can leverage intercepting network traffic to potentially compromise the network. So this is where cryptography does kind of come into play as being pretty important in all aspects. So essentially cryptography, you know the the term is used for a lot of things. Essentially, it's just the a controlled method of being able to encrypt and decrypt any type of data. In it could be anything from just files that you're encrypting on a workstation to encrypting emails to encrypting network traffic, like we do every day when we're connecting to banking websites or any other sensitive websites. Um, and essentially, we are taking plain text, unencrypting data, and using some sort of algorithm to turn that into ciphertext or or encrypted data. And the reverse process of taking that ciphertext or encrypted data and turning it back to plain text or unencrypted. Um, we touched on earlier, the two biggest general difference type of cryptography, symmetric encryption, using the same key that we're encrypting and decrypting. And, the caveat is each party has to have that key and it has to be kept securely. So that way you can encrypt and decrypt or establish an encrypted connection. Asymmetric encryption, that's going to be where you have a public and private key to either encrypt data, send out. I use my private key to encrypt something. You use my public key to decrypt it, or if you're trying to establish a connection, you're using that public-private key pair where the owning party has their private key, and you establish that connection with the public key. And again, you don't need to be like you don't need to necessarily understand how does each of these encryption algorithms works just to understand that there's that process that needs to play out in order to get that establish that encrypted connection. Are we using a shared private key or are we using a asymmetric public key infrastructure? Another important thing that we kind of been going over a few times hashing. Hashing is a little bit different from encryption. You're taking any amount of data and you're creating a fixed value hash value. So we've seen this with the password hashes in the Etsy shadow file. No matter what your password is, could be as long as it is, short as it is. If you look at that Etsy shadow file, it's a hashed value of the password, and it's the same length output no matter what the password is. And then had this last lab work, it'd be the same thing for the NTLM hash. Windows is hashing your password in a NTLM hash, and it could be a regular it would have been the password that's top secret exclamation, or it could have been like the FTP server that's cybersecurity. No matter what the password is, it would have a same value. So and that's what hashing is. And uh, hashing isn't doesn't get decrypted. Um, in order to find out to reverse what a hash is, you basically have to brute force or all the different passwords until you get a hash match. So that's anything that's stored as a hashed value is technically not reversible. The only way to derive what the value of a hash is to hash list of words or passwords until you get a match. Um, and we'll talk a bit more about hashing in a few more slides. Um, digital signatures. So you can encrypt emails, and but you can also send emails that are unencrypted but have your digital signature kind of have that. Yes, I'm saying who I am. I'm using my keys to digitally sign an email. And we'll go over a digital signature example in a second here as well. Um, Other things to concepts here: key management. Um, this happens every day on the internet. We'll talk a bit about certificate authorities and how we're managing public keys and private keys across the internet. So hash algorithms, like I said, it's producing a fixed size output, and they're used in a ton of things, whether it's integrity checking. You hash a file and you send it across the internet, you send somebody the hashed value. They want to make sure that no data got corrupted over the internet. So they take that file, you run the same hashing algorithm, the values should match to kind of say, hey, this file got across the internet, no data got corrupted, the hash value is the same. And that's one way to do an integrity check. Like I mentioned, password storage. The Etsy shadow file, Windows password management. It's all storing your passwords in a hashed value. And then we use digital signatures to validate authenticity of either files or emails or other things. So some hashing algorithms. MD5. This is the most popular hashing algorithm that's in use today. But as it's saying right here, it's now we're under we have the understanding that there's what's called a collision issue. So what that's basically saying is even though there's a low probability, there is a mathematical possibility where two different data sets will have the same MD5 hash. It's incredibly rare, but it does exist out there. So there's a lot of things that are still using MD5, but we are starting to move on to new standards. SHA-1, a little bit better than MD5, a little bit more bits, more bits, more bytes of the input and output, but it still has that same ability where there's a mathematical probability that there's two data sets that can have the same SHA-1 hash. So these two are only widely in use today, but anything new comes out is shifting over to these algorithms. So SHA-256, as you can see, more bytes. I don't see any mentions of there being the same collision problem. But yeah, same seeing SHA-56 in use for anything modern, more anything that's getting deployed in the last few years is at a minimum SHA-256, and as you can see, SHA-3 even more so. Just like anything, when you increase the bit encryption or you know the the algorithm to to scramble that data, more computational power. So just like everything, I think years ago, whatever bit encryption was the standard. I'm sure 5 to 10 years from now, this is going to be, it's going to be SHA-512 or something like that. We're always going to be increasing that bit encryption as the whatever the latest standard is. These two, I rarely see them, but they're out there, and I think it just depends on what applications in use. But these two, I've rarely seen these in use for applications. Yeah, we talked about encryption. We're gonna dig a little bit deeper into digital certificates and certificate authorities. Um, so, as I mentioned, digital signatures. It's a method of providing authenticity to a file, email, but most commonly used in email. So basically how it works. You could say data. It would be representative of an email. Um, use a hashing algorithm, whether it's SHA-256, and so you're not necessarily taking the data and encrypting it, but you're taking the hash value and using your private key to uh, or your private key to encrypt that hash. And when they get that email on the other end, they take the message, hash it, use your public key to decrypt it, and you should have the same value. And that's the general concept of how you're verifying somebody. This message is their message. They signed it with their encryption key, and you're taking that on the other end using their public key and kind of having that matching that hash value, saying you have that authenticity that this is their message. So a lot of times you send emails, you have the option, you could just digitally sign it, and you can digitally sign and encrypt it. So and they're all using, this is where it's you're not only are going to send an encrypted email, but you're also going to send that digital signature with the email. So you don't necessarily need to encrypt to send a digital signature, but you can do both in these cases. So certificates. These are essentially if you're trying to have a public-private key pair on the internet, what you'll typically do is you'll reach out to a certificate authority, and they'll validate who you are. They'll have a minimum level of data that they need to provide for that certificate as a certificate authority, and now you can own your private key, public key, and have a be able to establish HTTPS connection or digitally signed emails using these certificate authorities across the internet. Um, so for example, like Google, GoDaddy, AWS, there's tons of certificate authorities out there. Uh, you fill out whatever application, pay whatever money it is. On the bottom left here, they issue you your certificate. Maybe you're hosting a website and you have that you want to have that HTTPS connection that your customers can all trust. So now you have your private key, you have your certificate on your website. Um, they log on to a website, or they go to connect to your website, and they you're using this certificate infrastructure to they'll say that your certificate is trusted. It's you're a valid website. You say who you are. You're not inauthentic. So all these certificate authorities have to manage these trusts. For example, all the web browsers, Firefox, Safari, Chrome, there's like a browser trust organization, and all the certificate authorities have to maintain So this, just like we talk about, PCI has its own compliance and auditing. Certificate authorities have to meet their compliance as well. If they don't meet their compliance, they'll actually be pulled from trusts from all the browsers, and then their certificates become worthless. They lose out on a lot of money, go out of business. So these certificate authorities are held to a pretty good standard to make sure they're maintaining, accuracy for all these certificates they manage. So, if somebody wants to say they're Bank of America, your browser is going to give you the lock sign on the left saying, the certificate authority validated. This is a valid certificate. Um, if somebody were to create a fake website and create their own certificate, you'll likely get a little warning message when you browse to their website saying this certificate has not been, validated as authentic. Are you sure you want to continue? Something of that nature. So all of this is typically handled by web browsers and these certificate authorities whenever you set up an HTTPS connection. And this is similar to if anyone's wants to leverage this certificate authority to send encrypted emails or digitally sign their emails. A lot of companies will invest in having certificates so they can send encrypted emails, digitally signed emails. So, and if you're like, right now, if I was a free Gmail customer, I don't have this, but if I were to upgrade, if I am a business and I get Google Suite, like this is something I can pay additional for. But in short, it's important things to understand is that certificate authorities maintain validity of who they issue certificates to, and then once you have that certificate, you have that you own your private key. When people reach out to the website, they're using your public key and they are getting a response from the certificate authority that your certificate's been validated through them. So yeah, in a nutshell, a lot of the internet pretty much lives and dies through this infrastructure. Um, you can also set up private certificate authorities. In the federal government, the Department of Defense, we typically have set up our own internal certificate authorities. We have our own trust. For example, there's like the classified network, which isn't reaching out to the internet, so that it's not reaching out to these certificate authorities, but we still want to have this HTTPS connection. We still want to have encrypted connections, and we still want to have someone we can trust. So like on the classified networks, we'll have our own certificate authority, our own trust set up. So this, I mean, this exists for being able to communicate on the World Wide Web, but you can also set up this type of authorities on a private corporate network or private government network as well. And there's a hierarchy. So we have root certificate authorities, and then there's intermediate certificates. This is just like anything. You can have a hierarchical structure. So and so in the World Wide Web, you can have a a big certificate provider could be like the big ones that provide certificates across the internet, and they can have intermediaries that also sell certificates. And I'm not sure how far down the hierarchy goes, but yeah, there is a hierarchy of trust. So, but yeah, at the very top, it's called root certificates. Anything below the top, it's going to be intermediary, and then at the very bottom to that person that's going to using that certificate for, having HTTPS on their website or digitally signing and encrypting emails, they're going to be the end user. So I think you can have multiple intermediaries. I don't know if there's a limit, but just root, intermediate, and end user is the hierarchy. Right. I would say I may not be able to answer every question about encryption algorithms and certificate authority, public key infrastructure. It's something that I don't know. I've never 100% wrapped my head around, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'll do my best to come up with a useful answer here. But yeah, those are the concepts for our public key infrastructure, asymmetric encryption, certificate authorities, all all that stuff that runs our secure internet today. A few more things to cover. So we talked a bunch about firewalls. At its core, firewalls are closing and opening specific ports and protocols across different networks to, you know, just like all the security controls. We want to only let in what we need to for our network to function. So, uh, yeah, you leverage at a minimum firewalls to just let in the specific traffic you want. You never want to just have a host completely naked on the internet without some kind of network layer of protection on it. We did that scan on Metasploitable. Um, if you plug that directly into the internet, it would be hacked like in 10 seconds maybe or less. Um, Now it's living in this virtual lab, which is behind a firewall. So we're connecting in through a VPN. So this in this scenario, it's got a lot of it's got a firewall protecting it. Had this traffic been completely open to that Metasploitable box, it'd be hacked before we could even do any of these labs. Fundamentals of firewalls. We talked about a bunch of these. I'll go. I kind of cover a bit more of the terms. So packet filtering is the specific. It's talking about network layer packets, and essentially what it's doing. It's filtering based on packets, and it's using those access control lists. We think about the labs we did with Ubuntu, where we're either using the Ubuntu UFW commands to populate access control lists, or we had that one lab where we're leveraging IP tables to create access control lists. Um, Something else, so firewalls can not just that's talking about ports and protocols. Um, it can do something also called stateful inspection, but what that means, it's the state of a connection. Did it get initiated from a trusted host inside of my network? Like it's sending out that three-way handshake, SYN, remote host, are you there? Yes, they respond. So firewalls can also figure out um, which, did this connection originate from a host within your network? And that's important because it's preventing hosts from outside the network from just trying to send traffic into the network. So it can also understand what's the state of a connection. Is this something that should be happening? Um, some firewalls can actually, so application layer filtering. Some firewalls can actually understand. It'll take apart that entire network packet, and most firewalls are going to stop at layer 3 or layer 4. What's the IP address? What's the port protocol? Some applications will deconstruct the whole thing and look at what's the application. Is this gaming traffic? Is this it's not just looking at what port and protocol is this a game, or maybe I have an application firewall and I don't want to allow gaming on my corporate network. So some firewalls can filter even further. If you were to look at like Palo Alto firewalls, they're really popular in the application firewall where they can look at, like, they can get real specific. They can say this is Diablo, this is League of Legends, or whatever game, and you can filter out pretty a lot of things. They continue to expand their ability to understand what applications are traversing your network. So it takes it all the way from just not just IP address, port, protocol. They can filter at specific applications. Firewalls can also have function as other devices. So network address translation, that's where you're translating your private IPs to your public IPs. Firewalls can function like a router. It can do that. Firewalls commonly will host VPN connections. Like if you're trying to VPN into your corporate network. For example, when I was working at T-Mobile, we used Cisco's VPN solution. So the application on my laptop is actually connecting to a Cisco firewall on the other end to establish that VPN connection. Then I've been at other places where we use Palo Alto's VPN solution. So a lot of these firewalls, that's a bolted on function. They'll function as establishing those VPN connections and logging and monitoring. They'll send logs anywhere you want. And firewalls, just so like mentioning that Palo Alto firewall can do application layer filtering. It can also function as an intrusion prevention system. They're pretty smart firewalls, and yeah, firewalls have really evolved from just filtering on IPs, just filtering on ports and protocols. Yeah, we talked about all these packets. So packet filtering, that's strictly focusing on the network traffic. Um, Application layer, we talked about that, where it's looking at application. And for the longest time, the application layer firewalls was being associated with this next gen firewall. I think next gen's always going to be a buzzword. I'm sure they'll figure out another thing to call a next gen something. But yeah, for the longest time, application filtering was considered next gen firewalls. I'm not sure if it still is today. We'll see. I think I probably need to brush up what's the current next gen in firewall technology myself. Unified threat management, that's kind of where it's putting together multiple things, IPS, IDS, trying to be an all-in-one solution. And we've talked a bit, about software firewalls, virtual firewalls, things like your firewalls in Azure, AWS, and such. Um, like I said, firewalls can do all sorts of things. It can even have a antivirus detection. Try to block malware at the firewall level. Um, Bandwidth management, quality of service. This can be really important for if you're like a streaming provider or any kind of content provider. You might want to, it's always that balance of security and availability. If your big money maker is being able to provide certain services, you might want to just, hey, I don't want the firewall to hold up this type of traffic. I want it to be always up and running. I'm willing to take that security risk for bandwidth quality management. Important thing to call out. And uh, yeah, so pfSense, this is a really awesome free firewall. You can install this on you can essentially take a computer or a virtual machine, install pfSense, and install a bunch of either network cards or even virtual network cards in VMware. And pfSense runs as a pretty good firewall. It's got all sorts of configurations. Can run a VPN. It can do routing, all sorts of functions. I see a lot of people using pfSense instead of buying an expensive Cisco router. Of course, it's free open source, so it's only as good as the person configuring it. But if you're on a budget in a corporation, pfSense is a really good alternative to buying. Like if you look at the price tag on a Palo Alto firewall, you would see it's huge. So a lot of people go with free options out there because it's based on their budget. We talked about VPNs. So there's a lot. I think more commonly today with the work from home world, a lot of things we see are VPNs that you install on your computer, your phone, and it kind of just does the magical connection. You put in username, password, and it connects you to your corporate network. But we'll talk a bit more about some other aspects of VPN. Um, so some of these are a bit more interesting protocols. So point-to-point tunneling protocol. It says right here, one of the oldest, most widely supported VPNs. If I'm running a point-to-point server on my corporate network, you can actually on Windows and like I think Android and iOS set up a point-to-point connection without installing any third-party software. Um, the downside is it's not easy to configure. It's not like you would have to put in what's the server of my IP, all the, the IP of my PPTP server, what specific level of protocol. But it is, extremely widely supported. You can actually set up this on most operating systems without installing any third-party software if you know how to configure it. Similar for less widely supported, but L2TP, Layer 2 tunneling protocol, is for setting up a VPN between two switches. It makes it like the two switches are plugged into each other, but you can actually tunnel this over the internet. Not too widely in use today. It used to be kind of used for the days when everyone was working in offices and you wanted to have like two offices were physically connected to each other. You would do this tunneling layer 2, which is the switching protocol over IPsec over the internet. Again, not too commonly used today. Everyone's kind of shifted to running these more advanced VPN clients. OpenVPN, free VPN client. It's also widely supported across different devices. A lot of times OpenVPN is going to be something you can easily install on, well, not easily. I mean, it's supported and you can go into the configuration of your home router and set up an OpenVPN service and VPN through the internet. Again, there's the upside and downside to these open, free, widely used protocols is you got to do a little bit of configuration, configure what's the IP of the server, set up your user accounts, a little bit more knowledge on the configuration. IPsec is the protocol that establishes a lot of the tunnels for these VPN services. SSL, TLS. So this is what we've been talking about as far as the HTTPS connection. However, there's some custom clients out there that can establish VPN over SSL connections. One reason you might want to do that, so these other VPNs, they're going to have specific ports that need to be open, or like if the firewall doesn't allow whatever ports these are using to go through, maybe you won't be able to get that VPN connection. But almost every firewall is letting 443, which is SSL, because that's what you're using to connect to most secure websites, almost everything you're connected on internet. So I've seen people leverage SSL VPNs because SSL is something that's able to get through almost any firewall because it's open for that type of connectivity. I'm not too familiar with WireGuard. As you see on the slide here, modern lightweight VPN. I can't say I've seen it too widely used, but it's just thrown in here as a nice FYI as an alternative VPN technology. So common types of VPN. So remote VPN is what you'd use for the typical remote employee using a VPN client to connect to their corporate network. Something that we used to see, site-to-site VPN. And I would say we still see this in a lot of like government spaces, large corporations, basically. For example, I'm at the T-Mobile corporate office in Bellevue, Washington, and then we might have a site-to-site virtual, private network connection connecting me to the headquarters in Kansas City, Missouri, or something like that. So it's taking two networks and doing with site-to-site VPN, and it could be leveraging a variety of the technologies we talked about, IPsec, L2TP, but it's just the term used to connect two sites as opposed to remote access is connecting one person into a private network. Some of these are some older terminologies in use today. Extranet VPN. This used to be where the concept of bringing in a third party into your network. Anytime the term extranet was used, it was intranet is a connection that's not necessarily requiring the internet, and then intranet when you're connecting your intranet to a third party, the term extranet was used. So um, not too commonly used, but that's just if I'm making a VPN connection to an external organization that I'm doing business, the term I'd use probably in the past would be an extranet VPN versus connecting two of my same corporate offices within my company, where I'd say intranet VPN. And back when this was a new concept, mobile VPN was used for using smartphones, tablets, but for the most part, I don't see this terminology used too often lately. Client-to-site VPN. These are, again, this is somewhat of a older term. I don't see this used too often today. For the most part, everyone is using these VPN clients. They're just saying, "Oh, I'm just going to VPN in." Nobody says I'm going to client-to-site VPN in, but this was a term you'd use for having your clients VPN into your network. Peer-to-peer VPNs. This is somewhat interestingly new. So we have, if you're familiar with Web3 blockchain, um, these are decentralized VPN services. It is essentially a mesh of nodes across the internet, just run by anyone who wants to stand up a VPN node. There's pre-established protocols for there's a ton of these decentralized VPNs out there. There's Mist network, there's Sentinel, there's Deeper, but what it's basically doing is they're incentivizing people to stand up nodes to support their VPN network on their home internets. You go purchase a VPN node or configure a VPN node, plug it in your home network, and now if enough people do that, they are that's a private network that you can sign up, you can get the app, download and traverse this decentralized network, and they typically incentivize it by providing people, you get rewards on whatever crypto coin on that blockchain for providing a node on the network. There's a ton of that stuff that's I'm seeing emerging today. Creates a lot of interesting security concerns because uh, you know if I'm looking up an IP and it says it's what's popular, Surfshark VPN, like it'll be registered to Surfshark. It's easy to see this traffic's coming over a VPN. These decentralized VPNs are it's a kind of an emerging threat in the cybersecurity space because if I had a VPN node on my network, I'm like a Ziply fiber customer. Um, that's what it would look like if you looked at my IP. But realistically, it could be me hosting a VPN node and threat actors coming through my exit node IP, or somebody else is using Comcast. So, every day more complexity into the cyberspace makes things interesting here. And yeah, modern VPNs. That's what everyone's using today. Um, Multi-protocol support, user friendly. That's the big one. You just basically download it, say sign up, and you're on running on a VPN. And then if it's your work environment, they've got it pre-configured where it pushes to your work laptop, or they've already got the configuration figured out. So these modern VPNs are kind of pushing away these older VPNs like OpenVPN, point-to-point tunneling protocol. These things are just so much easier to deploy, and not just so much easier to deploy, so much easier to manage as well. Um, Common risk, so malicious VPN. So, uh, attackers love using VPNs. They don't ever, attackers aren't going to want to come to their, attack using their own IP for multiple reasons. One, attribution. If their IP gets logged as part of an attack, it's something that could be used later to arrest them, convict them, whatever. Um, Maybe if they're coming from a certain country like Russia, they might want to max their IP because maybe that there's a lot of IP geo blocking. So There's a lot of people using VPNs that for malicious access, which makes it difficult for um, you know detecting good versus bad. A lot of your regular users are using these VPN services like Surfshark because they've been told you don't want to ever browse the web, going to airport Wi-Fi using a regular VPN or using that network because anyone else on that network could be eavesdropping, ARP spoofing, and intercepting your traffic. So maybe you got people regularly using VPN for their day-to-day browsing, and then are maybe you want to alert on certain VPNs trying to connect your network. So sometimes it could be a bad actor on a VPN trying to attack you. Sometimes it's just your regular employee using a VPN for their own personal privacy, and then they log into their email from their personal device and they trigger an alert. So it definitely makes things really difficult. My solution here is, we always set up policy saying you're accessing corporate networks, you are going to use the corporate VPN. You're not allowed to connect to our corporate assets using any other VPN than this authorized VPN, whether it's a Cisco VPN or the Palo Alto VPN. That way, you're kind of pushing users away from using those private VPNs to connect to corporate information. Um, yeah, it's a really complex problem that it creates. It's created headaches for me wherever I'm at, where we end up resetting someone's password because it looks like they're coming from a malicious VPN. Then they tell us, "Oh no, I use this VPN all the time too." So I'm like, "Well, then I'm like, you're just gonna have to not use it when you're accessing corporate email." And it's a lot of false positives, but that's a good stance to take for that. Of course, VPNs, they add extra hops in your traffic pattern, so that's going to create latency. If any of those hops is slower, that's going to be an issue just to reduce speed. Um, so something to think about for VPNs. Um, and if you're running a corporate VPN, you can actually configure your employees' devices to say like, oh, only run traffic to these tools through the VPN. Everything else it's not going to go through VPN. Like YouTube, your users are going to access YouTube and all kinds of other streaming. And if you configure everything to go through your corporate VPN, you're going to bog down your corporate network. So you definitely got to factor that in when you're configuring VPN services. VPN trust, you know, just like we're essentially moving trust. I don't trust this shady hotel Wi-Fi. I don't trust this corporate coffee shop Wi-Fi. Let me use this VPN instead. You just got to take into account, how much do you trust that VPN? There's a lot of really good trustworthy ones out there, and there's a lot of ones that are pretty shady. And So it's something to think about. And then, now we're talking about decentralized VPN, like that's another security risk. If we're trusting everyone to set up nodes across the internet, how secure is their protocol? And right, it's limited trust in free VPNs. There's a lot of really good free ones out there. Just do a little homework on, ones that you should trust versus ones you don't. This is my recommendation. VPN blocking, it's what I kind of talked about. Like, um, I everywhere I've been pushing for, hey, we block all VPNs except for our trusted VPN. We don't want hackers coming in through whatever VPNs they're using. So, and you kind of see this with a lot of things like streaming, um, banks. I've traveled to Indonesia, and I was trying to log into certain things, and I'd get blocked because they're blocking traffic from Indonesia. Then I'd install a VPN, and I'd still get blocked saying so. There's a lot of people will consider the same things. So sometimes you're just blocked coming in from VPN. Uh, Leaks. So like I was saying, some VPNs aren't trying to bog down their network, so they might not send everything through a VPN tunnel. Something to consider if you're using VPNs. If you're telling people use the VPN to when you're logged on to a public Wi-Fi, There's a possibility some things are configured to not use the VPN and they'll leak out into that public Wi-Fi. So just, it says DNS leaks, but there's all sorts of other protocols that might leak because they're not pushing through the VPN. Mm, uh, Legality. I don't know. I would say legality. There's all kinds of things that create legal issues with VPNs. Whether it's how is your data being stored, or if you're running a VPN for your employees, especially international employees. If I've got employees that are in Germany, UK, I mean, I'm going to have completely different privacy considerations. And yeah, there's this big can of worms that I always consult my international privacy whenever I'm concerned about these things. Misconfiguration, just like anything. If you were to, I've seen a VPN configuration where it was saying if you're coming from certain IP space, for example, cellular customer space, that we going to treat that as trusted, and I've just seen a lot of issues where it treated certain things like trusted VPN space when it probably shouldn't be. So anytime you're configuring anything, especially VPN, you kind of, you're not careful, you're not testing, or you could create security holes by treating something as a trusted VPN, and really you're just creating a hole somewhere. Um, and big recommendation, I think, says kill switch. I think being able to kill a VPN connection into your corporate network is really important. Um, Somebody's going to fall for an attack, and you'll have a malicious actor leveraging a VPN eventually. 2FA will hopefully prevent that, and you want to log stuff like that. So, tons of considerations with VPNs. I mean, you absolutely need to use it, but always got to consider this with VPNs. All right, we're almost at time. Let me just briefly cover the next lab. So, um, the next lab is going to be configuring HTTPS. So you're gonna log on to your Windows servers, and kind of like the Windows week, we're gonna go into our WinDC01, and um, you're gonna configure a web server. So you're gonna set up um, IIS, Internet Information Services. So you're gonna run through that install. That should be the simple part. The part that's gonna take a little bit more configuration. So it should be get up and running, and everything should be next, and then now you have your generic IIS web page running. What you're going to want to do here is we want to set up you use a self-sign certificate. So instead of using a certificate of authority like you would in real life, but it would cost you money, we're going to set up a self-sign certificate on here. So you're going to walk through these steps to create a server certificate and configure that server certificate for your blank web page. Because we've been through all these labs about intercepting some insecure connection, and if you've got it up and running, you should see at the end where you can HTTPS into this web server, but because it does not have a trusted security authority, it's going to give you this warning. So even though it says this is the successful completion of the lab. Essentially, you'll go to more information, say go to it anyway, and just take notice of, it's self-signed, self-trusted, and this is not what you want to see over the internet because it's not being, you know, it's not coming from a trusted certificate authority, but for the lab, you've successfully installed a certificate. Had you gone and um, did the application process with a certificate authority, and instead of creating a self-signed one, you went and um, plugged in the certificate that you got from the certificate authority, you would get like a successful lock like you would going to like Amazon.com. But yeah, so we'll run through these for the next lab. You'll run through these steps and set up these security settings and a the certificate settings and a group management password policy to secure your internet server. That should be it in a nutshell. Um, any questions on like I said, I'm gonna go take a look at our lab to see why this didn't generate the NTLM capture that was expected. So I'll come back with that on Monday or Tuesday, I mean. But any questions what we went over today and or the upcoming lab? All right. Well, thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your Saturday. I'll be on for about 15 more minutes, and Joel will be available for most a good chunk of the day for any lab assistance. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Ivan. If you have any question, guys, just let me know. I'll start the recording. Bashira, I believe you have issue. Can you let me know exactly what happened?